There is a particular kind of room that exposes weakness. You don't notice it from the outside. It looks ordinary, a meeting, a discussion, a gathering of capable minds. But the moment you step inside, something shifts. The pace is different. Ideas move faster than you expected. References are layered. Arguments are sharpened before they're even spoken. Someone makes a subtle joke, and the laughter signals intelligence, not noise. You feel it instantly. Your breathing changes slightly. Your posture adjusts without permission. Your mind begins calculating. Are they smarter than me? Am I keeping up? Do I sound slow? And that is the first mistake, because the moment you measure yourself against the room, you unconsciously accept its hierarchy. Most people respond predictably in these environments. They talk more than necessary, and they interrupt mid-thought. They rush to add value before fully understanding the conversation. They over-explain simple ideas to prove competence. It is a quiet panic disguised as participation. Machiavelli would not panic. He would observe. He understood something most ambitious people never learn. In rooms of high intelligence, dominance does not belong to the fastest thinker. It belongs to the least reactive. When you react to brilliance, you shrink. When you compete impulsively, you expose insecurity. When you overperform, you signal that you feel inferior, and sharp minds detect insecurity faster than they detect mistakes. The room is not testing your intelligence, it is testing your composure. Because in elite environments, status is not granted to those who know the most. It is granted to those who appear unmoved, in the person who speaks calmly, the person who pauses before responding, the person who does not rush to fill silence. Intelligence earns respect. Control earns influence. If you are surrounded by smarter people, you are not at a disadvantage. You are inside a power evaluation. And the real question is not whether you can match their intellect. The real question is whether you can maintain your status without competing for it. Because in rooms filled with brilliance, the one who controls perception controls the hierarchy. And hierarchy, not intelligence, determines who leaves with power. The instinct to compete is almost automatic. When you feel outmatched intellectually, something inside you pushes forward. Speak faster, think quicker, demonstrate knowledge, prove you belong. It feels necessary, but it is almost always a mistake. And the moment you enter a room and decide to compete on intelligence, you accept a battlefield you did not design. And whoever designs the battlefield controls the outcome. If someone is sharper, more informed, or naturally faster at processing information, competing directly only amplifies their advantage. They are operating on familiar terrain. They are prepared for challenge. In fact, they expect it. Smart people are used to intellectual duels. What they are not used to is someone who refuses to duel at all. This is where strategic repositioning begins. Instead of matching their speed, slow the room down. Instead of adding more information, refine the direction. Instead of proving knowledge, control emphasis. Notice something subtle. Discussions do not collapse because of lack of intelligence. They collapse because of lack of structure. And brilliant people often overload rooms with analysis. They expand possibilities. They introduce nuance. They create layers of complexity. But complexity without control leads to diffusion. If you position yourself as the one who simplifies, frames, or concludes, you begin shifting hierarchy. You don't say more. You say what matters. There is a quiet authority in someone who listens fully, then speaks once, precisely, and shifts the trajectory of the conversation. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He did not attempt to out-argue scholars in theoretical brilliance. He studied power. And power rarely belongs to the loudest thinker. It belongs to the one who decides which thinking becomes action. Intellectual dominance is visible. Structural dominance is subtle, and subtle dominance lasts longer. When you refuse to compete directly, you conserve composure. You avoid overexposure. You deny others the satisfaction of measuring themselves against you. Instead of asking, "Am I as smart as them?" Ask, "Who controls where this conversation goes?" The one who controls direction controls influence. And influence, not intelligence, determines who rises. In rooms filled with sharp minds, competing on intelligence makes you smaller. Controlling structure makes you indispensable. That is the shift. Smart people dominate rooms with answers. They speak in conclusions. They reference data. They present frameworks. They move quickly from premise to solution. Most people try to compete by offering better answers. That is predictable. Predictability weakens position. Your leverage does not lie in having superior answers. It lies in asking superior questions. But not passive questions, not curious questions. Strategic ones. There is a difference. A passive question seeks information. A strategic question shifts the structure of the room. When someone presents a brilliant idea, most listeners nod or challenge the details. Instead, ask something that alters the axis. What assumptions are we relying on here? What happens if this works too well? What variables are we not accounting for? Who carries the risk if this fails? Notice what happens. The room slows. Confidence recalibrates. The person who was flowing effortlessly must now think defensively. Brilliance thrives on certainty. Questions introduce uncertainty, and uncertainty shifts hierarchy. You are no longer competing on speed. You are controlling tempo. Tempo is power. Even the one who decides when the room accelerates or pauses controls its emotional rhythm. A well-placed question can do more than a long argument ever could. It can expose blind spots without direct confrontation. It can redirect attention without appearing dominant. It can elevate your perceived depth without displaying your full thinking. Machiavelli understood the value of indirect influence. Direct opposition creates resistance. Indirect redirection creates compliance. A question, when used correctly, feels harmless, but its effect can be surgical. It can dismantle certainty. It can expose fragility. It can reposition you as the one thinking beyond the obvious. And here is the subtle advantage. When you ask powerful questions, others begin engaging your frame. They respond within your structure. They defend against your lens. And without realizing it, they are operating inside the perspective you introduced. You did not overpower the room. You reshaped it. When surrounded by smarter people, do not try to outshine them. Instead, guide where their intelligence lands. The sharpest mind in the room is impressive. The one who directs the sharpest mind is influential. And influence, not brilliance, determines who ultimately controls outcomes. Most people misunderstand silence. They think silence signals weakness. They think it exposes ignorance. They think it lowers their perceived intelligence. So they speak. They fill pauses. They clarify points no one questioned. They add commentary to avoid appearing slow. And in doing so, they surrender control. In rooms filled with sharp minds, noise is common. Everyone wants to contribute. Everyone wants to demonstrate capacity. Everyone wants to be seen thinking. The room becomes dense with words, and the one who refuses to rush becomes visible without trying. Selective silence is not absence. It is discipline. When you choose not to speak immediately, you create tension. When you pause before responding, you force others to wait. When you allow a statement to hang in the air without reaction, you elevate its weight. Silence creates gravity. Machiavelli understood that information is currency. Every time you speak, you spend it. You reveal what you know, what you don't know, what triggers you, what excites you, what threatens you. Most intelligent people reveal themselves constantly because they trust their intellect. They argue quickly, they defend passionately, they expand unnecessarily. But composure under silence suggests something more dangerous. It suggests calculation. The person who listens carefully observes behavioral shifts and speaks only when necessary appears grounded. And grounded people feel higher in status. Observe what happens in high-level environments. When someone speaks less but with precision, others lean in when they finally talk. Their words carry more weight because they are rare. Scarcity increases perceived value, even in conversation. Selective silence also allows you to gather patterns. You notice alliances. You detect insecurity. You identify who dominates and who defers. You see which ideas gain traction and why. While others compete for visibility, you collect structure, and structure is long-term leverage. Silence also prevents emotional leakage. When you are surrounded by smarter people, insecurity tempts you to react. Selective silence protects you from overexposure. It stabilizes your posture within the hierarchy. In rooms of brilliance, speaking constantly is common. Remaining composed under pressure is rare. And rarity is interpreted as strength. You do not need to speak often. You need to speak strategically. Because when you control your silence, you control your reveal, and the person who controls what is revealed controls perception. Perception, not intellect, determines who holds the highest position. There's a dangerous trap in rooms full of intelligent people. It is the desire to be admired. When surrounded by brilliance, many try to impress. They deliver polished arguments, they display depth, they reference complex frameworks, they chase intellectual recognition. Recognition feels powerful, but it is unstable. Admiration is temporary. Usefulness is protected. Smart rooms are filled with impressive people, but there are always fewer indispensable ones. This is where hierarchy quietly shifts. Impressive individuals are applauded. Indispensable individuals are relied upon. And reliance creates leverage. Instead of asking, "How do I sound smart?" ask, "How do I become necessary?" Brilliant thinkers often create complexity. They expand ideas in multiple directions. They analyze deeply. They explore possibilities, but analysis alone does not move outcomes forward. Rooms stall when too much intelligence lacks execution. This is your entry point. You do not need to outthink them. You need to stabilize them. Become the one who clarifies next steps, summarizes scattered ideas into structure. He bridges disagreement calmly, connects theory to action, identifies practical consequences. When discussion drifts, anchor it. When ideas fragment, organize them. When debate escalates, neutralize tension. The room may not remember who argued most eloquently, but they will remember who ensured progress. And once people associate you with movement and stability, something shifts. They begin to look to you at critical moments. They wait for your assessment. They depend on your clarity. Dependence quietly elevates status. Machiavelli understood this principle at the highest level. He did not seek to be the most brilliant voice in Florence. He positioned himself as necessary to rulers. Necessary advisors are not easily removed. Impressive ones are. The difference is structural. If you are surrounded by smarter people, you do not compete for admiration. Compete for centrality. Make yourself the pivot point. Because when outcomes rely on you, intelligence becomes secondary, and the one who becomes structurally necessary no longer feels outmatched. They become irreplaceable. When you are surrounded by smarter people, your ego will tempt you. It will whisper, challenge them, expose their flaws, prove you can outthink them. This instinct feels powerful. It is also reckless. Directly challenging the most intelligent person in the room does not elevate you. It activates hierarchy defense. When you confront strength head-on, you force comparison. And in a comparison, the established authority usually wins, especially in intellectual environments. Smart individuals are accustomed to debate. They are prepared for attack. But they are rarely prepared for strategic alignment. Instead of opposing brilliance, attach to it. Publicly support strong ideas, privately refine weak angles. Add depth without seeking spotlight. When someone dominant feels reinforced by you, something subtle happens. You are no longer seen as competition. You are seen as enhancement. Enhancement creates protection. Protection creates influence. This is not submission. It is positioning. Machiavelli never recommended confronting power directly unless victory was certain. He advised proximity. When you align with someone's strength, you absorb some of their authority. When you amplify their clarity, they unconsciously associate you with competence. When you stabilize their thinking, they begin to rely on your presence. And here is the strategic advantage. The person you align with will defend you without realizing why, because attacking you feels like weakening their own structure. You become integrated into their dominance. Meanwhile, the room recalibrates. Instead of seeing you as someone trying to compete upward, they see you as someone operating beside strength. Status transfers through association. This is subtle but powerful. Many ambitious individuals make the mistake of trying to dethrone the smartest person. Few realize it is easier to stand next to them and quietly shape direction from there. Alignment gives you access. Access gives you leverage. Leverage gives you quiet control. In rooms of intelligence, do not fight to be superior. Attach strategically, then influence from inside the structure. Because the one who shapes power indirectly often holds more influence than the one who displays it openly. Most people walk into intelligent rooms with the wrong definition of superiority. They assume the sharpest thinker holds the highest rank. They assume speed equals dominance. They assume verbal agility equals control. That assumption weakens them before the conversation even begins. Because if intelligence is the only metric, then you have already accepted someone else's advantage. True superiority is layered, and intelligence is only one layer. Look closely at powerful environments, political, corporate, strategic. The individual who controls outcomes is rarely the most academically brilliant. They are the most composed, the most measured, the least emotionally reactive, the most aware of perception, the most patient with timing. Intelligence can win arguments, but control wins influence, and influence decides hierarchy. The smartest person in the room may impress others, but the person who regulates emotional tempo shapes the room itself. If someone speaks aggressively, you remain calm. If someone dominates conversation, you wait strategically. If someone flaunts knowledge, you introduce consequence. Superiority begins the moment you stop measuring yourself against their intellect. Instead, measure them against structure. Ask yourself, who controls attention? Who controls direction? Who controls tension? Who decides when the discussion ends? Those answers reveal real hierarchy. Machiavelli did not try to be the most celebrated intellectual of his era. He studied rulers. He understood that the ones remembered in history were not always the brightest minds, and they were the ones who shaped systems. Systems outlive debates. If you redefine superiority as emotional stability, strategic patience, and structural awareness, you remove the insecurity that smarter people create. Because now the metric has changed. You are no longer competing for brilliance. You are competing for leverage, and leverage accumulates quietly. When you enter rooms of intelligence with this shift, something transforms. You stop trying to sound impressive. You start observing patterns. You stop reacting to speed. You start controlling rhythm. You stop fearing sharp minds. You start studying them. And here is the final truth. The smartest person in the room may feel dominant, but the one who understands hierarchy is untouchable. Redefine superiority, and suddenly you are no longer surrounded by smarter people. Yet you are surrounded by pieces on a board, and you are the one thinking about the board itself. The next time you enter a room where everyone feels sharper than you, pause. Do not rush to perform. Do not scramble to contribute. Do not measure your worth against the speed of their thinking. Because the moment you react, you concede hierarchy. Most people lose status before they speak. They reveal it in posture, in tone, in the urgency to add value, in the need to be seen as competent. But competence is not what determines power. Composure does. When surrounded by smarter people, your task is not to match intelligence. It is to remain unmoved by it. Let them speak quickly. Let them display depth. Let them impress the room. You observe, you frame, you question, you anchor, you align, you become necessary. And slowly, with the moment, without announcing it, you shift the structure. Because hierarchy in intelligent environments is subtle. It belongs to the individual who controls tempo, controls exposure, controls emotional stability, controls direction. That person may not speak the most, but when they do, the room recalibrates. That person may not argue the hardest, but outcomes orbit their presence. This is the repositioning. You stop trying to prove you belong in the room. You start behaving as if you were never threatened by it. And that shift alone alters perception. Remember this: the smartest person in the room can dominate conversation, but the person who understands power can dominate perception. And perception decides who rises. If you value learning how to move strategically in rooms where brilliance is common but structure is rare, subscribe. And this is not a channel for those chasing applause. It is for those studying leverage. Because once you understand repositioning, you will never again feel outmatched. You will feel observant. And observant people rarely sit at the bottom for long.